Britain votes out, Cameron's getting out, and Scotland may go too. A tumultuous day in British politics.
After a victory for Leave as shocking as it was decisive, a shaken David Cameron, his voice faltering, pledged to quit as Prime Minister by the autumn.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Also tonight, the breakup of the UK beckons as Scotland plans another push for independence.
Market meltdown, the pound slumps and stocks slide.
And Labour in turmoil as MPs plot to unseat Corbyn.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin in Westminster.
Good evening from Westminster on what's been a momentous day for this country and for Europe. We awoke this morning to a new Britain, one few so-called experts had predicted. Nearly 52% of us backed leaving the EU, a majority of just over 1 million votes. A few hours after that result, David Cameron announced he was off too, standing down as Prime Minister in a few months' time.
To the victor, the spoils. A possible successor, Boris Johnson, called it a glorious opportunity for Britain to control its own destiny. But sterling plunged, billions were wiped off the stock market, and Scotland's First Minister warned a second independence referendum was highly likely. More on that and what this all means for you and the country in just a moment. But first, our political editor Robert Peston with all the drama of the fallout from Britain's vote to leave.
A historic walk for a family and a country.
The British people have voted to leave the European Union, and their will must be respected.
And our goodbye to the European Union is his goodbye to us.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination. This is not a decision I've taken lightly, but I do believe it's in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required. There is no need for a precise timetable today, but in my view we should aim to have a new Prime Minister in place by the start of the Conservative Party conference in October. I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it, and I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
Just over a year ago, he re-entered this famous house as the Tories' returning hero, having unexpectedly taken them to election victory. No joy in this return. Here is the man, one of David Cameron's oldest political rivals, who will be seen to have toppled him as leader of the Leave campaign and who may succeed him. Although today Boris Johnson's way was barred, not by rivals, but by angry North London bikers.
I've known David Cameron for a very long time, and I believe he's been one of the most extraordinary politicians of our age.
So what exactly have we voted for in backing Boris Johnson and his fellow Leave leaders?
To those who may be anxious, whether at home or abroad, this does not mean that the United Kingdom will be in any way less united, nor indeed does it mean that it will be any less European. And I want to speak to the millions of people, directly to the millions of people who did not vote for this outcome, especially young people who may feel that this decision in some way involves pulling up a drawbridge or any kind of isolationism, because I think the very opposite is true.
The total number of votes cast in favour of Leave was 82,000.
But surely many of these people actually voted to make us less European. Anyway, it was here in Sunderland, shortly after midnight, that the scale of the revolt against our EU membership started to become clear. Scotland and London fought back for the pro-EU cause. Here's Wandsworth in South London. But by the time we got this momentous result in Birmingham at 4:40 a.m,
the number of votes cast in favour of leave the European Union was 227,000.
ITV News had already called it for Brexit.
At 4:35, we at ITV News are calling this as a leave victory, an extraordinary moment in British history.
And then at 7:20, it was official.
This means that the UK has voted to leave the European Union.
And let's get rid of the flag, the anthem, Brussels and all that has gone wrong.
Nigel Farage may not have led the Leave campaign, but he more than anyone led us to this place, with the way he built the UK Independence Party into a serious challenger to the Tories and increasingly Labour.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
We voted to increase the power, the sovereignty of this place, in the hope, but not the certainty, that it'll make us richer, safer, happier and prouder to be British. Robert Peston, ITV News.
So, who then might replace David Cameron? Well, Boris Johnson is the favourite with the bookies, but don't forget they got the referendum result wrong. Next is the Home Secretary, Theresa May, who's kept a pretty low profile during the campaign. Stephen Crabb has indicated that he wouldn't rule out a chance at the leadership. But Chancellor George Osborne, the man once seen as a natural successor to Mr Cameron, is now looking unlikely and may even struggle to hold on to his own job.
Well, the result also threatens to break apart the United Kingdom itself. Scotland and Northern Ireland both voted to remain in the EU and now face being dragged out of it. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said that was undemocratic and made a second independence referendum highly likely. In a moment, we'll have the latest live from Edinburgh and from Belfast. First, our correspondent Martin Guy's the report on Scotland's next step.
3 flags hang outside the Parliament in Edinburgh, but not for much longer. The people of Scotland may be asked to decide which one to take down. There was no Union Jack behind Nicola Sturgeon today, as she threatened to open a new front in an old battle.
Scotland faces the prospect of being taken out of the EU against our will. I regard that as democratically unacceptable. It is a significant and material change in circumstances, and it is therefore a statement of the obvious that the option of a second referendum must be on the table, and it is on the table.
What's more, she said, it's likely to happen. Those words will play well in some quarters, but not everywhere in this ballot-weary country. The Scottish Tory leader said the focus should be on a settled future.
I do not believe that a second independence referendum will help us achieve that stability, nor this is in the best interests of the people of Scotland.
Some things don't change. Scotland's annual Highland show drew big crowds today, but there was a sense of bewilderment at what's just happened and what might come next.
We can't understand why Nicola wants to be separate from England, stand alone, and yet wants to be part of Europe.
People are going to be voting for independence, not because they don't want to be part of Westminster, it's because they want to be part of Europe. So it's a double disaster as far as I'm concerned.
There's a lot to be hammered out here. Even if the people do want another referendum, Westminster would have to grant it. But the flames have been fanned once again.
Our correspondent Neil Connery is outside Stormont tonight. Neil, what are the implications for Northern Ireland?
Mary, Sinn Féin already calling for a referendum on a united Ireland in response to what has happened here. Last night, the majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain inside the European Union. 56% to 44%. Now, Northern Ireland's First Minister and the DUP leader Arlene Foster says she believes that vote has strengthened the union between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. The Northern Ireland Secretary of State Theresa Villiers, who of course campaigned to leave the EU, says she believes the conditions haven't been triggered to start a border poll here, which is what Sinn Féin is demanding here in Northern Ireland in the wake of what has happened. Clearly, Northern Ireland is very different to Scotland, but I think the impact of this EU referendum in Scotland, in turn, could have implications on what happens here in Northern Ireland.
Neil Connery, thank you.
Well, the reality of so-called Brexit sent the financial markets into something of a panic this morning. Sterling plunged against the euro and the dollar, and billions of pounds were wiped off shares. Our business editor Joel Hills is in the city tonight. Joel, market mayhem today then, but how is it going to affect us, do you think?
Well, look, Mark, the markets were betting on a Remain victory, and as soon as it became clear that Britain was on its way out of the European Union, the pound collapsed against the dollar. It fell extremely sharply. It's currently down 8%. This is hardly a vote of confidence in the British economy, and one impact is absolutely immediate and will be felt. Yesterday, a pound bought you $1.50. Today, it will buy you around $1.36. If you're going away on holiday, your spending power has been reduced. Now, if the pound stays at these levels for a sustained period, then I'm afraid prices more broadly here in Britain will start to rise. You'll feel it in the next few weeks when you fill up your car. You'll feel it more generally in the months that follow. And if you have a pension, look away now, because on the stock market we saw in London when it opened a very significant fall. There was a rally on the back of it. The Governor of the Bank of England insisting that the British banking system was robust enough to handle Brexit, and it stood ready to intervene.
To be clear, the Bank of England will not hesitate to take additional measures as required, as markets adjust, and as the UK economy moves forward.
We are entering, and we have voted to enter, a period of intense political and economic uncertainty. We are leaving the single market, and we don't know what that means for trade and our nation's prosperity. And some international companies based here in Britain are already unsettled. Tonight, Ford, JP Morgan, US giants both say parts of their business will maybe need to be relocated out of Britain, along with the jobs that come with them.
All right, Joel, thank you very much indeed.
Well, the vote to leave has split countries, communities and even families. This is how Britain voted yesterday. The red areas showing it was mainly England and Wales where people were in favour of an exit.
The vote was especially strong in the north of England, but even there the picture was mixed. Manchester voted overwhelming in favour for Remain, but Sunderland was firmly out. Our political correspondent Libby Wiener went to Sunderland in the first of two reports tonight on a divided Britain.
It's a gritty place, Sunderland, and one that knows how to speak its mind. Yesterday it thundered, leave.
Leave. Leave.
But why?
Get our country back. Well, I was debating, but so I just put leave.
They may have named a bar Westminster, but the spirit here is one of open revolt against the political classes.
We've been very left behind when it comes to the economy and forgotten about. It just seems to be anything outside the M25 doesn't really matter.
The city's biggest employer, Nissan, warned of the dangers of quitting the EU, but only a few people, like this businessman who supplies parts to the company, voted Remain.
I voted to stay, more to do with my lack of trust at the political chaos that will follow. I have no...
You think you've been vindicated now by what's happening?
I think so, yeah.
Back in town, they weren't so worried.
Oh, I think it'll all stabilise out. I think it's still fear things that they're churning out. I don't think it'll last. I think everything will stabilise and everything will jog along very nicely.
No, I think it's the money we pay every week. Could do something better with it, like our National Health Service.
They've lost the taste for Brussels, except, it seems, the strawberries. Libby Wiener, ITV News, Sunderland.
For the majority of those living in Manchester, the direction they wanted to head was clear, but their hopes of remaining in fell apart.
Shock.
I'm absolutely gutted. I don't feel welcome.
There were tears at this property company from both bosses and foreign employees, such as Elise from France.
I feel like a part of the population wants me to go, basically, so that's pretty sad.
8:30, there was floods of tears happening. It was actually very challenging for me to watch that, and my staff who have attracted to Manchester actually question if they're welcome. Devastated.
Among students, anger that the older the voter was, the more inclined they were to leave.
People have, in my opinion, been selfish. If they're older and they're voting for such a dramatic change and haven't thought about the younger generations that it'll affect.
Future worries too for families such as the Hashirs, who've made the UK their home.
For those people who voted in, now it's not fair compared to those people who voted out. I mean, we have not been listened to.
For everyone heading abroad, the British pound has less value. For many in this diverse city, so now does the message being projected.
It's upsetting. It's upsetting to think that we are going backwards as a country instead of moving forwards.
But that's not representative of the country's beliefs, and so the city is heading for departures, whether it likes it or not. Richard Pallo, ITV News, Manchester.
Right, still to come on the ITV Evening News, how the rest of Europe sees us now. The latest from Brussels tonight.
That and more after a very short break. Join us then.
Welcome back. The Remain camp's failure has already cost David Cameron his job, and pressure is now mounting on the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, he was accused of failing to show enough passion during the campaign. And today, senior MPs tabled a motion of no confidence. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports now on Labour's political fallout.
What would Tony Benn say?
On the wrong side of the argument, on the wrong side of many Labour voters, now Jeremy Corbyn is on the wrong side of a no confidence motion. The Labour leader is trying to fend off criticism of his campaign from within his party in Parliament.
We had a Labour position and a Labour campaign. It was not the same as the Prime Minister's. Obviously, the Prime Minister has a rather different vision of Europe. He sees it much more as a sort of free market Europe. We see it as a social Europe.
Mr Corbyn's apparent reluctance to put himself forward has led two senior Labour MPs to table a motion of no confidence in their leader.
The European referendum campaign was a test of leadership for Jeremy Corbyn, and he failed. He didn't come out quickly enough and vigorously enough. He was very half-hearted when he got engaged, and Labour voters up and down the country were not clear as to what his message was.
But the Shadow Chancellor says the issue wasn't communication.
He did get that message across, but a majority of the population didn't support the message, didn't support the policy. We've got to listen to that.
Either way, Mr Corbyn has a problem. Labour MPs could vote on the no confidence motion here as early as Tuesday. The result will be non-binding, but given the mood in the Parliamentary Labour Party, it wouldn't be at all surprising if it triggered a full-scale leadership election in pretty short order. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, our political editor Robert Peston joins us now. Robert, a momentous night. What does it actually mean for Britain?
Well, you won't hear me saying this very often, but the truth is, none of us really know. We know what we voted against. We voted against membership of the European Union, but that comes with huge uncertainties. I've been saying for months that there would be a shock to the markets. We've seen that. I've said for months that I thought there'd be an economic slowdown. We don't know how severe that'll be, how much poorer we'll be. But then there are other huge uncertainties. Leave campaign to reduce immigration. We don't know how much they will be able to do that. And then there are all sorts of uncertainties to do with our joint policing arrangements with the European Union, our access to the single market, our access to other markets all over the world. The people have spoken that they don't like the status quo. What they haven't instructed our MPs about is what comes now. This is an extraordinary moment.
Robert, thank you.
Well, European leaders today called for a quickie divorce, urging Britain to start the process of leaving as soon as possible. Many of them fear a drawn-out process will place further pressure on the stability of the EU and may encourage other countries to follow suit. Our Europe editor, James Mates, reports from Brussels on Europe's reaction.
It was not a great morning to be British in Brussels. This is a crisis for the UK, but equally one for the rest of the Union, and one they insist they neither needed nor asked for. Stony-faced, they walked into an emergency breakfast meeting to plan the morning after the night before. The message was brutal. If you're leaving, there's the door. Please go now.
We now expect the United Kingdom government to give effect to this decision of the British people as soon as possible, however painful that process may be. Any delay would unnecessarily prolong uncertainty. There will be no renegotiation. There will be no renegotiation.
First David Cameron, then Boris Johnson had told them there was no rush to start the withdrawal process. They're having none of that.
No, we can't negotiate until the Tories have held their Congress. This is not acceptable.
Is this policy of demanding an immediate triggering of Article 50 part of a hard line on Britain to make sure there is no contagion?
We can't lose time. Look to the markets of today.
And more than the markets, they're looking at populist politicians across the continent. A French referendum on membership of the European Union is a democratic necessity, said Marine Le Pen of the French far right. And this from her Dutch counterpart.
I will also make a point that in the Netherlands we should have a national referendum about an exit as soon as possible.
The top priority here, the only priority, is to ensure that what happened last night doesn't spread. That's why officials here are being as ruthless as the rules allow. Britain must not be seen to be getting an easy option. They are in survival mode.
I always remember what my father used to tell me: what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
And not being killed by this will drive every action in Brussels from here on in. James Mates, ITV News, Brussels.
And that brings to an end our coverage on a remarkable day in the political life of this country, a day that will shape the future of Britain for better or for worse. A day of drama in Downing Street, where a Prime Minister who gambled and lost has paid the price with his job. A day that sent shockwaves through Brussels, centre of a European project rejected by British voters and now threatened as never before.
And on top of all that, a day that could lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom, with Scotland ready to make another bid for independence. This island is poised to cut itself free from mainland Europe after 40 years of ever closer union. It is to the delight of some and the despair of others, and all eyes now are on the future, whatever that may bring. Tom Badbury will be here with an extended news at 10, but from both of us here in Westminster and all the team, bye-bye.